You walk into a room, nothing dangerous is happening, no one is attacking you, but your body reacts as if somebody is. I don't like people. I prefer to stay quiet. I'm just not a social person. Because real introversion isn't fear, it's a preference. They're not afraid of speaking up. They're not scared of expressing opinions. They don't replay conversations in their minds saying, "Why did I say that?" Confidence isn't always natural. Sometimes it's rehearsed, it's practiced. Most people who like to call themselves introverts aren't describing a personality. They're actually describing a fear. The fear of being watched, judged, getting things wrong. Now think about it honestly. It's not that you don't have thoughts. It's not that you don't want to speak. And it's not that you don't want to feel things deeply. But there's always this split second hesitation before you open your mouth. You know, that very moment where your brain goes, say it carefully. What if I sound stupid? What if they misunderstand? What if this becomes awkward? So you stay quiet. And over time, this quietness becomes your personality and you start calling yourself an introvert. But pause for a second and ask yourself one uncomfortable question. So if you were in a room where nobody judged you, nobody interrupted you, nobody mocked your tone, your words, your ideas, if this was the case, would you remain silent or would you speak your mind? Because real introversion isn't fear, it's a preference. They recharge alone, they enjoy solitude, but they're not afraid of speaking up. They're not scared of expressing opinions. They don't rehearse sentences in their head before saying them. They don't replay conversations in their minds saying, "Why did I say that?" They don't feel a knot in their chest whenever attention shifts towards them. What we're talking about is not introversion. We're talking about social anxiety. And social anxiety hides itself pretty well. It hides behind words like, "I'm shy. I don't like people. I prefer to stay quiet. I'm just not a social person." But the truth is a bit complicated than that. You're not staying quiet because you enjoy silence. You're staying quiet because speaking up feels uncomfortable. It feels unsafe. And it has been that way for a really long time now. Unsafe to your image, unsafe to your dignity, unsafe to how people might label you. Somewhere along the way, you learn that the cost of saying the wrong thing is higher than the benefit of saying anything at all. So you adapted. You started filtering yourself, started reducing yourself. You started editing your personality before anybody else could. And the world rewarded that. Teachers called you well behaved, relatives called you mature, society called you respectful. But what they were really rewarding was your restraint, your suppression, your ability to not disrupt the room. You just accepted it. This is who I am, an introvert. It's a neat label, a very comfortable one. It explains everything about you without forcing you to confront anything. No need to examine fear. No need to unpack past embarrassments. No need to question why your heart starts racing whenever the spotlight shifts onto you. All you have to say is, "This is my personality," and move on. Introverts choose solitude, whereas anxious people escape into it. One is preference, the other is protection. And when you mistake protection for personality, you never address the wound underneath. You never question why your voice feels smaller in groups, why your thoughts feel safer inside your head, why expressing yourself feels like stepping into danger. You just keep calling it introversion, whereas it could have started off as a fear. Fear of being judged, fear of being wrong, fear of being seen too clearly. And fear, when repeated long enough, doesn't feel like fear anymore. It starts to feel like identity. So now let's go back to when it started, your childhood. You're sitting in a classroom when your teacher asks something. You know the answer, yet you hesitate. Before raising your hand, you scan the room. What if I'm wrong? What if the class laughs at me? What if the teacher reacts harshly? So you don't take any action. Another kid blurts it out confidently. Albeit wrong, he has the confidence to say something. And that impresses the teacher. So now the teacher corrects him, encourages him, and remembers him. You? You remain invisible. And invisibility costs, and it costs dearly. From a very young age, the kid who speaks more gets more feedback and gets more visibility. They also become comfortable with attention. They become confident through repetition. Confidence isn't always natural. Sometimes it's rehearsed, it's practiced. And the ones who practice it early start compounding advantage. Meanwhile, the quiet child gets labeled as so disciplined, so calm, so mature, but they're rarely labeled as bold, leadership material, promising. So, the lesson is being quiet means you're a good person, but being expressive means you hold power. And trust me, power gets rewarded way more than goodness. So, now fast forward to adolescence. Public speeches, group discussions, debates, friend circles. The ones who speak confidently, even if they're average, are perceived as smarter. And the ones who hesitate, even if they're brilliant, are perceived as being unsure. A lot of the times, perception becomes reality. That's the only thing that matters. And opportunities follow perception. So, the socially fluent kid becomes the class representative, leads projects, forms networks easily, and asks for help without shame. And the quiet one? He waits for the right time, for the right moment, for somebody to notice. He observes. But the world rarely notices silence. You see socially comfortable people moving forward, getting internships, building connections, being invited. So you tell yourself another story. They're extroverts. But what if many of them just never learned to fear attention? What if they were allowed to be messy in public, to say stupid things, to laugh loudly? What if they were allowed to disagree without punishment? And here you are, trying to minimize yourself. Now we move to adulthood. Workplaces reward visibility. Promotions don't go to the most thoughtful person in the room either. They go to the person who presents ideas clearly, speaks in meetings, networks after hours, and volunteers visibly. Two people may possess equal skill, but the one who's able to articulate things clearly usually wins. So now you tell yourself a third lie, that you don't like attention. But maybe deep down it's just that you never felt safe with attention. The socially comfortable don't necessarily have the brightest of ideas. They just have the confidence to say things first. They just package their ideas without hesitation. Because hesitation comes at a price. Every time you shrink back, somebody else moves forward. Every time you overthink, somebody else improvises. Every time you protect yourself, somebody else makes a statement. They build presence. This doesn't mean that you have to become loud, but it does mean this. If your quietness is coming from fear, the world will quietly pass by you. And that's the biggest tragedy of mislabeling social anxiety as introversion. Because when you give up and say that this is who I am, is there any room for improvement left? I don't think so. So, you stop challenging the pattern. You stop experimenting with small risks. You stop building tolerance to attention. You stop developing the muscle of expression. That needs to be trained too, right? Meanwhile, the people who are social, their advantages keep compounding because they were never afraid of being seen. And being seen, whether you like it or not, comes with its fair share of advantages. So now the deeper question is, did you choose silence or did silence choose you? And once silence feels normal, it stops feeling like a choice. It starts feeling like upbringing, like this is how we are. Because this conditioning didn't start at school or colleges. It started at home. Let the elders speak. Don't talk too much. Why are you arguing? Sit properly. Please don't embarrass us outside. None of these sentences sound traumatic. They sound responsible. But over years, they do something powerful to a child's mind. They link expression with risk. Speaking becomes something that you need to calculate. So you start watching your tone. You start watching your volume, your timing, your body language, eventually even your own ideas. You don't just learn what to say, you learn when not to say anything at all. And the reward system reinforces it. The quiet child is praised. Such a good kid, never talks back. So respectful. But respect in many homes is confused with silence. Agreement is confused with maturity. And obedience is confused with personality. Because in our culture, we were never shown how to disagree with someone safely. So you grow up managing yourself constantly. Before speaking, you say, is this appropriate? Or is it too much? Will it upset someone? And by the time you're done with scanning, the moment to speak is already gone. Someone else has already filled that space. And in life, you don't get too many chances. Over years, this behavior shapes your identity. You begin to believe, I'm just not the expressive type. I just don't like to talk too much. I'm naturally reserved. But what if you weren't born reserved? What if you were trained to regulate yourself so tightly that spontaneity never got a room to exist? Look at children before conditioning sets in. They speak freely, they interrupt, they ask uncomfortable questions, they laugh loudly, they cry openly. So, this means that expression is their default state. It is silence that is learned. And it happens in environments where the hierarchy is strong, where reputation matters more than lives, where family image is everything, where elders aren't questioned. You don't just learn manners, you learn containment. You learn how to shrink without being told directly to shrink. After a point, you don't even realize that you're doing it. It becomes automatic. You hesitate even when you know that you're right. Again, confusing social anxiety with introversion. Because on the outside, it's very difficult to tell the difference. They all look calm, they all look composed, they all look non reactive. But if you look deeper, There's a lot of self regulation going on in there. Constant awareness, constant judgment, constant adjustment, and that is exhausting. Now, this brings us to something even deeper because it's not just about your family or childhood, it's the structure of the society itself, where speaking freely can cost you dearly. And now, this is where it gets even more personal because it's no longer about your upbringing or the society anymore. Now it's physical, it's inside your body. You walk into a room, nothing dangerous is happening, no one is attacking you, but your body reacts as if somebody is. Your heart beats a bit faster, your shoulders are tensed, your breath shallow, and your mind scanning for threats. So you start rehearsing. If they ask me something, I'm gonna say this. Oh, no, no, that's too weird. That's not right. Okay, maybe I'll just smile. You calculate eye contact, you calculate tone, you calculate how long you're gonna hold a sentence. Now, that's not introversion. That's hyper awareness. Introversion doesn't make your palms sweat. It doesn't make you replay conversations at 2 a.m. It doesn't make you think, why did I say that? Did that sound stupid? That's anxiety. And anxiety is sneaky. So instead of saying I'm being anxious, you say that I'm just not a people person. Instead of saying social situations overwhelm my nervous system, you say I prefer being alone. When you're anxious, your brain treats attention as a threat. It treats it as exposure. Being looked at, being observed, feels uneasy. It feels risky. Speaking feels like walking on thin ice. Silence feels like control. And because silence reduces the tension in the moment, we prefer it. It's like our brains reward silence. So you stay quiet, and the anxiety drops, obviously. And there comes your relief. So the next time, you stay quiet again, then again, then again. And one day, avoiding attention becomes automatic. Now solitude feels safe. And the cruelest part in all of this is everybody who's looking at you will think that this is all normal. I mean, you look calm, you look composed, you look reserved. Some people even might compliment you. You're so chill, you're not dramatic, you're low maintenance. These people will never see the internal conflict that you go through every single day. They don't see the mental taps open in your head. Over time, you stop observing these things about yourself too. And you simply say, this is my personality. I'm just an introvert. But personality doesn't create body tension. Personality doesn't create fear of embarrassment. Personality doesn't make you avoid opportunities that you always wanted. Do you know what does? Anxiety does. And when anxiety gets mislabeled as introversion, you stop trying to heal it because there's nothing to fix. Am I right? This is your personality. You just think this is who you are. So you don't challenge the avoidance. You stop taking small social risks. You don't practice speaking in low stakes environments. You protect this identity instead of exploring it, instead of questioning it. And the longer that identity remains intact, the more permanent it starts to feel. And one day, you genuinely start to believe that I can never be that person. The person who speaks freely, the person who commands a room, the person who doesn't overthink every sentence. But let me ask you a simple question. What if you were meant to be that person before anxiety and fear took over? Before you started doubting yourself? And this is where everything comes together. Not as a diagnosis, not as an attack, but as a realization. Maybe you never were just an introvert. Maybe you were adapting to judgment, adapting to hierarchy, adapting to embarrassment, adapting to environments where speaking freely has consequences. You see, this silence protected you. This self-monitoring protected you. Staying in the background protected you. These were your survival strategies. But survival strategies aren't meant to become full-blown personalities, right? They're not supposed to become permanent identities. Because what protects you in one phase of your life may limit you in another. The child who stayed quiet to avoid punishment becomes the adult who hesitates to express ideas. The student who avoided attention may grow up and become a worker who avoids visibility in his office, becomes the very person who questions his own ideas. So, the easiest explanation becomes, I'm just introverted. It's clean, it's socially acceptable, and it doesn't involve confrontation of any kind. But remember that it can also become a cage. Real introversion is just a preference. There's no shame in it. There's no internal conflict. There's no desire to speak that gets followed by hesitation. It's just a quiet comfort in solitude. It's not an escape plan. If expression feels like risk, and if being seen feels like exposure, then maybe it's not introversion. Maybe it's our conditioning that never got questioned. And conditioning is reversible. It can be changed. Our brains are remarkably good at that. But it doesn't happen overnight, it doesn't happen dramatically. It starts to happen when you start speaking in situations where you'd normally be quiet. It happens when you start expressing yourself without modifying or editing your opinions. And it starts to happen when you start tolerating the discomfort of being seen. You see, confidence isn't a personality trait. It's something that you practice. It's a skill that you learn over time. More messy conversations, imperfect expressions, more tolerance for attention. You see, it's about reclaiming choice, the choice to speak or to stay silent, the choice to express or to simply observe. And this shouldn't happen because of fear. This should happen because you decided that. The quiet belief that this is who I am, maybe it just never was. Maybe your thoughts were never meant to be locked inside your head. Maybe your voice wasn't meant to be strangled. Maybe it was just conditioning, training. So the next time you call yourself an introvert, pause for a second and ask yourself this question. Is this who I really am? Or has the world changed me for the worse? You know the answer.